Welcome to BrandBusters with your hosts, James Schwinn and Sean Lee. Together, we bust open the latest in CPG, retail media, and life, or whatever the we want. And for today's episode, we got something special cooked up for ya. Extra spicy. Take it away, Sean.
Awesome. Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode. We have a treat for you guys today. Hopefully, if you're hungover, we can get you a remedy for that today. But we've got Brooks Powell, who's the founder and CEO of the brand Cheers. Cheers was founded in 2014 while he was a student at Princeton. Cheers has amassed over 500,000 customers, achieved big box retail distribution, secured patents, and appeared on Shark Tank, which I'm sure we'll have great stories about, and stands as the #1 alcohol-related health and wellness product that's currently available on Amazon today. Their mission is bringing people together through promoting fun, responsible, and health-conscious alcohol consumption. And as I get older, I probably need as much of this product as I can get, because when the kids wake up at 7 a.m., I am not feeling too great after a night of wine or tequila. So with further ado, we'll jump in and have a great conversation with Brooks. So Brooks, one thing I have to ask you, it's been a trend with our guests that we have people with Ivy League backgrounds who want to punish themselves by starting a CPG brand. Like, what do you think that is? What is it that draws people from the Ivy League to just want to jump in and found a consumer goods brand?
I have no idea. I mean, I think brands are sexy. I think that's part of the reason people get into brands. For me, that wasn't quite my story. My plan coming out of Princeton was actually to become a Baptist minister. And so you may be wondering how the heck someone goes from Baptist minister to hangover tycoon. Anytime someone says there's two types of people in this world, obviously the world's not that black and white. But I generally find that there are some people who want to go into business and they're searching for an idea, right? I do think there are other people that they come across an idea that so impassions them that they have no choice but to start a business around it. And I'm the latter. So I came across dihydramycin, which is the main ingredient in Cheers. We then, combined it with cysteine and was able to get a patent on that. But I came across dihydramycin when I was a sophomore at Princeton. I was actually a religion major studying Christian ethics. Princeton wants you to be a well-rounded individual, take classes outside of your major. I picked a neuroscience class. Midterm project was write a 12-page paper on a drug of your choice. I picked alcohol. It was, a fun project, right? The professor's like, well, if this person can explain how a drug messes up your brain and gets you addicted and gets you high, they've probably been paying attention in class. That just put me at the right place at the right time to be on Google Scholar, right as this article called Dihydramycin as a Novel Anti-Intoxication Medication was published. And basically, this was like the first major Western study into this flavonoid called dihydramycin in relation to alcohol, even though people in Eastern countries had been using this as like a tea for centuries, specifically, actually millennia. At least 4,500 years, written in the first pharmacopoeia ever as a awesome hangover treatment, good for your liver, use it after alcohol. Well, this study basically showed that dihydramycin binds to the same brain receptor that alcohol binds to. And you could prevent rats from becoming alcoholic. You could essentially take alcoholic rats back down to baseline levels of alcohol consumption. And rats given DHM showed no signs of hangovers. And that to me was fascinating because I was always kind of a capitalist at heart. And, the idea of being able to do good and make money at the same time was always like a really interesting concept. And this would be a product that people want and would also be good for society. So I brought the idea to a few Princeton professors. They said, yeah, things that happen in this receptor in rats translate really well to humans. And really spent the next 3 years in between classes trying to figure out supply chain laws, branding, raising money so that I could go full-time on this business when I graduated.
Man, and going back to that, I mean, how did you did your studies suffer as a result? Did you find yourself like still maintaining the academic marks while launching a brand, or did you feel like you went a little bit off the wagon and kind of pursuit of your passion?
Both. I mean, I think it's funny. You actually can write a nice tight essay when you don't have much time. You kind of get down to the brass tacks of things quicker. No, it was a challenge. I took 1 year off to start Cheers, and I wanted to be like Mark Zuckerberg. I wanted to be an Ivy League dropout and have a really successful business. The problem was I didn't get far enough in my year off to actually be able to go out on my own. So my parents were like, "You can't stay here any longer. You got to go back to school." So going back to college was a way of getting room and board again, so I could keep working on Cheers. And it was funny, after spending a year in the real world trying to build Cheers, you just look at school with such a different lens. And none of my classmates had that lens. Like, they would be like, "Oh my gosh, I have this quiz coming up," or midterms. And like, once you've been on the outside of prison, things just look a whole lot different, right? So I'd be negotiating with professors and stuff. Like, it was like, you were doing things that a student
you do in the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as a customer of Cheers for probably about the last year, I can verify that you prioritize education kind of throughout the pre and post purchase process or customer journey. Probably better than most brands that I purchased from. I actually kept, so I've got, for those of you that are watching on YouTube versus listening, I actually have the Cheers Restore product right here. This is my kind of go-to after a couple drinks at night. It does make a material difference the next day. Can absolutely verify that. But the pamphlets, I don't hold on to most like product information, like packaging after I buy it. I kind of throw it away. I held on to yours for a while. Going into like how the liver metabolizes alcohol. It's actually alcohol that's not the problem, but the acetaldehyde, which is actually way more toxic for you. So we're seeing this trend with a couple of brands. I'll stop bearing the lead here with this question, but like this concept of like edutainment and like video, like how are Cheers thinking about educating, I think a problem at the surface that a lot of consumers are aware of, but maybe not understand the science behind it. Like, what are the mechanisms beyond your packaging that you're trying to kind of bring this message to prospective customers?
Yeah. So by the way, do you have that packet on you?
I don't have it on me right now.
I wanted to see which one it was. Hopefully you got our newest one, our quick start guide, which is like literally, like a book
awesome.
Quality
it is
type thing. And, we're able to get those things produced for like, I don't know, 25 cents or something. It's like the best 25 cents that you could add to a box. But we're doing it at the scale of like 100,000 of these little booklets each time. So what we have found is two things are true. The first thing is that despite the fact that half of Americans drink alcohol, almost none of them understand what's actually happening when you drink alcohol biologically. Right? There's so many wives' tales around what makes you feel better the day after drinking alcohol. There's so many things that are just repeated over and over again. Like, oh, the only thing that can help you is water and thyme. Like, there's just like, despite the fact that everyone drinks alcohol, no one knows a whole lot about it. And then the second thing that we realized is that nobody trusts brands in our category. So I remember when I was filing the first patent for Cheers, I found over 100 tombstones in the English language of people that have tried to start hangover prevention brands and failed. And I think there's two reasons for that. One, just like sort of in the world, you have before, BC and AD, right? There's kind of before DHM and after DHM. So before DHM, these hangover products just didn't work. And then after DHM, they could work, but it was still going to be very hard to get consumers to want to buy them because they've tried so many products in the past that never worked. They kind of burnt out. They're like, no, tried those products before, they don't work. So what we did is we paired a working product with a very scientific messaging to sell it. And it was so funny. We worked with like branding agencies. I wasted $250,000 right after we raised $2 million from venture capital investors. They're like, oh, you have to go to a branding agency. This is back when Red Antler was, to like Casper mattress. And, back when like, in that era, spending $500,000 or $250,000 to like brand something seemed like a really good investment. And it's funny. It's like, go look at all the brands that Red Antler did, and most of them are cataclysmic failures now, right?
Yeah. And the
yet
the irony is, you probably you've got good people that work at those branding places, but a lot of it was probably punted to like the 22 to 24-year-old right out of school anyway that was doing the bulk of the work for you. So it's probably not that much different than what you and a copywriter and a designer could have done on your own.
Yeah, and I think now moving forward in my career, so I'll back up to this. They'd always say, "Oh, science doesn't sell. Science doesn't sell. Science doesn't sell." And so we didn't do in the early days a whole lot of science stuff, and we didn't have a big unlock in the business until we really just tried to start explaining how our products work scientifically. And Facebook and Instagram allows for 89 seconds in an ad, and we use all 89 seconds. I already talk pretty fast, and then we actually speed my voice up to 1.25x in most cases. So it's like, it's coming at you fast, and we use all the scientific charts and really try to explain these concepts that, like, hey, the main two reasons that you feel bad the day after drinking alcohol are because of short-term alcohol withdrawal and acetaldehyde exposure, and here's how our product helps with both of those. And that's been a very big unlock for our business.
But I think I think you made a really key point there, which is historically, like, I'll be the first to admit, like, all these hangover remedies just feel like weird gas station pills, right? Like something that you'd buy, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, most likely isn't going to work, right? So you've already got that huge barrier that you have to overcome. And you have consumers, I would say, even within the past decade, long form podcasts, everything else is becoming more popular. So I think you have consumers who want to learn, who want to research, who want to understand the science behind something. And you've got a category that people don't understand, right? I drink a bottle of wine, I feel terrible the next day. Have never really thought why. I just know, like, there's implications of drinking alcohol. I'm hungover. So I think if you can explain that, like why you get hungover, and then why your product scientifically, solves that, it helps you overcome that like weird gas station pill barrier, and kind of plays on the trend that consumers are probably smarter than a lot of big brands give them credit for. And I think that's the trend you see with long form podcasts and everything else. People want to learn about a topic and go a little bit deeper, especially if it's a real problem or pain point that they have.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's been really great about sort of the long form podcast thing is yes, consumers want to go deeper, but specifically in the dietary supplement space. I mean, I think like people like Peter Attia, like the longevity doctors, like when you think about what, by the time things actually make it mainstream, like it's so funny. I mean, when I think about this, I was, 22 years old in 2014 running around saying all the doctors who say that the only way you can get over a hangover is water and time are wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, and now it's funny. We actually, on the National Institute of Health's page on alcohol, they have a section called "What is Hangovers?" And they've actually said hangovers are actually 6 things: mini withdrawal, acetaldehyde exposure, sleep disturbances, so on and so forth. It's inflammation. I can't remember the way they list them, but if you actually go bucket them, really, like, inflammation is going to be directly tied to acetaldehyde exposure, and sleep disturbances are going to be directly tied to short-term alcohol withdrawal. So really, you could bucket it into dehydration, short-term alcohol withdrawal, acetaldehyde exposure. But 10 years ago, there was none of that. And if you ask doctors, like, how do you get over a hangover? They'd just say, oh, just hydrate better. And there's no clinical evidence for anything else. Well, I think the Peter Attias of the world have done such a good job of explaining that just because something is early in its clinical evidence life cycle doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just hasn't been proved to the level that doctors are recommending it for the general public. And so what that leads to is everyone's seen that graph of like early adopters, early majority, late majority, so on and so forth. The Peter Attias of the world are like those early adopters that then help you get the early majority. Then the brand has enough money to launch its first clinical study. Then you have that clinical study, and then you can kind of get the late majority, and this really works its way into culture, and you see, way higher ACV and retailers bringing it in, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, I think we got lucky that long form podcast became a thing, and that some consumers are getting more intelligent. I wouldn't say all of them.
Well, I think, something you brought up earlier, I think maybe the notion that the kind of more, the products that were maybe trying to innovate in the space before you came along and some of the research, a lot of skepticism, and you see this in performance supplements. I do a lot like from creatine and pre-workout and nitric oxide and whatever else, but there's a lot of like snake oil type products out there. One of the things you're doing, I think, well, so more of an observation, and there will be a question, is just the nature of you as the founder building in the open and being very transparent about this process. I think you're seeing this trend play out on LinkedIn. Sean Riley being very, from Dude Wipes, being very like just himself. And putting it out there, but you're kind of in some ways putting your neck out there as the founder, making yourself accessible for, what could be a contested category in a lot of ways. But I guess talk to us a little bit about why you feel like it's important to build out in the open. I mean, you've done this with your booth and your most recent trade show at NACDS, how your team is working. I think I've seen how you time block your calendar. You're a new father as well. So balancing like this transition in life, I think, there's nothing that's been off the table from what I've observed. So why do you feel like that's important, and how do you feel like that's benefited your business?
Yeah, I think Sean Riley was the reason we got onto LinkedIn, and I had no idea that the LinkedIn strategy would just work so well. So basically, I mean, two things happened. I became a huge Sean Riley fan, and then we went to the first NACDS TSE, that National Association of Chain Drug Stores Total Store Expo, which is a mouthful, but once you've said it a bunch of times, it rolls off the tongue. Yeah. And what I realized is that a lot of these merchants in the food, drug, mass, and club channel spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. And so I kind of connected those things. I said, you know what? I think we should start posting on LinkedIn all the time. And when you start posting on LinkedIn, I mean, things are fine for like the first like week or two. And man, you get to the third week and you're like, the hell am I going to talk about? So you end up getting to this place where it's like, what am I going to talk about? And you just kind of look around the office and look around your life, and you're like, all right, I guess I'll snap a photo of that and then talk about why we're doing that. And so I think, it's extremely beneficial to post on LinkedIn and sort of show the behind the scenes of building your business. But that's why you see so much of the stuff where I literally take, screenshots of my laptop and what my calendar looks like this week, and like talk about, why it's hard to build a CPG brand in our space and all of that. I think the other big thing that's a really interesting switch is I don't know what year it started. Maybe it's around like 2015, but I think in like the 1900s, you'd always have a brand that you would then attach celebrities to, right? And you'd have no idea who the heck the founder of Kellogg's is, other than, his last name's probably Kellogg's. And you have no idea why they're making the decisions that they're making or what they're doing and why. But now, like, think about like an Elon Musk, you kind of have direct access to his brain because he's posting on X about like challenges they're having with the Cybertruck production, or like their vision for the Model 3 or whatever. And so I think what's really fun is that founders and CEOs and management teams are starting to become celebrities. And I think that's a really good thing, because I think when you pair the management team with the brand, it leads to far more consumer trust. I even think like it was actually fascinating, Southwest had that big screw up where like their computers went down and they had to like manually figure out how to get all the freaking steward and stewardess teams onto all these flights and do it manually and everything. And the CEO basically like just came out and was like, yeah, here's what's happening. Here's what we're trying to do about it. And was just like super forthcoming. I think consumers want to understand who's actually building the brands and why they're making the decisions that they make, and that makes you want to purchase those products. It's all part of the brand.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I was in the mid 2010s. I was at Procter & Gamble in their ventures group. I founded a brand called Zevo for them. That's a natural insect control brand. And I remember at the time we were selling it on Shopify. I made a big point that the R&D people, myself, others were going to be kind of the face of the brand. So like have an about us on the website, why we care about this category, like how it affects our lives and our choices and our kids. And then even like emails would come from us, would be videos of us talking. Advertisements would have us included in it, talking about the product. And I think it was such a radical departure from typical big company, which is we have all this money, let's just get a slick ad created and then just blast it out everywhere on TV or on social media. And it was really a departure of thinking. And there were a ton of people that pushed back. They're like, well, should we have individual people tied to this? I'm like, I think you need to build trust. People want to know even if it's not a true founder, they want to know who's working on it and are those people trustworthy and why are they working on the business? And, it's that extra layer of credibility that I think for the better part of the 1900s, you just didn't see brands ever do that, nor did consumers really question or care.
I think it is a great trend. I think it is a good for society trend that people know the people making their products. Like, I don't know why that would be a bad thing. I do know there are risks to it. So one example is I remember the founder of Ghost, Ghost Energy, like the energy drink. They do a lot of stuff where they're putting Sour Patch Kids, like they're doing a lot of licensing deals, and that's like where they're coming with their flavors. And he's like, yeah, the beauty is we don't have to use celebrities and like we have no risk because you never have to worry about Tony the Tiger saying something racist or something. And you're like, well, yes, okay, that is a risk, to attaching a brand to people, but I feel like the benefits far outweigh the risks.
Absolutely. And I think, especially if you're talking about the founder or the CEO, I think it creates a good type of maybe accountability as well. Like your persona, your public perception now, like you are now more accessible, which, creates allure with the brand, but also like you're held to a higher standard, which also means you're going to kind of covet and really make, I think, be even more intentional of the decisions that you're making for building the company. So I think it's a win-win all around. And I like to your point, good for society. Absolutely agree.
Can I add one more point to that, James?
Yeah,
I've actually
please.
found, yes, building in public, there are the risks to it that like you could offend somebody, or like I would say, 99% of the time it's been good for us. We have like one example of it being bad for us that I can't share. Just someone took something out of context, took it the wrong way, and then like that's just they wrote us off as that's our story or something.
Always,
right? And, like,
always going to be a risk when you're building in public, though.
But what we have found is that when people start to understand your character and it's just kind of building over time, even if you were to say something wrong, you'd go, well, look, I've known Brooks for a long time. I followed him for a long time. Like, I know that's not what he meant. Or, you know what I mean? They're willing to extend grace to you because they have the fuller picture of you as a human being. And I actually say that building in public can de-risk you in that regards, because then people won't take things out of context because they just have more context on you as a manager and person.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Sean.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And just like wrapping up, I wanted to circle back to something that you said that was really important in this building in public space of what you and Sean Riley, Dude Wipes do. Like, building in public on LinkedIn, I think, is incredibly important. I would argue that for the most part, LinkedIn is probably 95% of people that are on pretty frequently, but they're just consuming content and kind of lurking. They're not producing content. So if you can really hit your target audience that are the buyers, the retailers, people working at big companies, or even, suppliers that you may have not known that you could work with. I would encourage a lot of people to do that because I think it's an untapped market, especially for B2B business, where most people are just consuming and aren't creating. So if you do create, you can really stand out. Whereas, Twitter or X is just kind of a sea of noise. You have to get more egregious and more outrageous to stand out.
The amount of distribution we've won because of LinkedIn, like I will post something about how we're seeing how meta ads are affecting retail sales in a specific channel. And then a buyer within that channel says, wow, that really resonated with me and makes sense. I'd like to take you from 1,000 doors to 3,000 doors. I mean, it is like we have a press release that we put out every single day, like on our business, that all the merchants, see. Sometimes I'll just post a picture of like, look at our cool modular display. Here's how we did it. And we'll have a merchant reach out and say, hey, can I have 300 of those for Christmas?
Awesome.
And so, yeah, one mentor of ours said, you don't need to boil the ocean. And so it's funny, like, our LinkedIn posts, I'd say my average LinkedIn post is, somewhere between 5 and 10,000 views. But those 5 and 10,000 views are always like the 10,000 most important people to the health beauty care industry, right? It's like all the merchants, all the brokers, all the suppliers that, deal in this space. And that's really cool. This isn't like TikTok where you're just trying to get 1 million views from random consumers. It's like, even if you have a post that has 200 views, if those 200 views are the right 200 people, the right 200 decision makers, that's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and Sean, there's a question that you had that I think might be interesting to go on. I think just about like the medical community and something like that validation. I think as you're talking about having the right audience, Sean, I think that would be really interesting to hit on right now.
Yeah.
As you're on the board of Dr. Nose Bass, so there's probably some correlation there from kind of that community support.
Yeah, for sure. Like in Brooks, for reference, I'm on the board of a company called Dr. Knows Best. It's think of it as like a snot sucker for babies, but like supercharged. It's like a hospital grade nasal aspirator that was founded by this really great ENT. But for that brand, his credentialing, since he's a world renowned ENT, other doctors, really has been huge for their credibility and making them seem, highly recommended, big and popular. Just looking at your website too, it seems like even on the product pages, you have things that pop up that say 159 doctors recommended this product to their patients. How has that played a role in your strategy? And how do you think about credentialing and getting the medical community involved in recommending, a hangover supplement, which, not all doctors want to recommend supplements that aren't tried and true or pushed by big pharma.
Well, it's even harder for us because, to recommend a hangover supplement would almost feel like you're recommending something that's like, oh, drink more. So there's like a whole ethical issue. If you really look at Cheers's development, it started with sell the science. So basically really explain how these products work. But, and that worked for the early adopters, right? Because they could think from first principles and go, okay, I realize that Brooks Powell is a 31-year-old who was a religion major at Princeton, and doesn't have credentials. Like, there's nothing that being a religion major has to do with understanding things about our alcohol metabolism, right? But they could actually listen to the science and go, yes, that makes sense. I'm going to buy this product. Now, as we're expanding from, 10 million in revenue to, trying to get to sort of this internal goal of 100K per day by May of next year. I don't know if we'll get there, but that's kind of our internal goal. You need credentialed people to say what you were already saying. And so a big initiative that we launched really 2 or 3 quarters ago, that just takes a few quarters to like actually get the doctors involved in everything, was let's keep selling the science, but let's start using doctors to say exactly what we were already saying. And then that would increase conversion rates. And so we've brought on a few equity holding medical doctors as spokespersons into the company from a variety of different backgrounds. And then obviously different demos too. And then now, we just launched with Front Row. Front Row basically gets doctors to recommend products publicly on a website, and then you're allowed to then put that number of doctors that are recommending your products publicly awesome. On your website. And we're adding like 25 per day, 25 doctors per week and accelerating, which is pretty sweet. And so that, and then we'll launch like a clinical study too. But it's all part of doctorifying the brand and really selling the science and trying to get people to understand that, hey, this is how it works. This is why it's good for you. And this is why you should take it. I'd say with the doctors, explaining alcohol metabolism isn't the challenge. The challenge is explaining to them that Cheers as a brand is about smarter drinking, not about get wasted and feel fine the next day.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny. It's like ethics almost always becomes the conversation topic that I have with doctors, not the science. The science is easy. It's just objective. It's the ethics piece of, hey, people drink alcohol. The smartest way to drink is not drink at all. The second smartest way would be to drink less and then use a product like Cheers. And then I have to convince these doctors that we are not going to get people to drink more. We're actually trying to get them to drink less and drink in a smarter way. And that comes back to the building in public. When you literally have years now we have years of proof that this is our brand. This is what we're trying to do. This is our vision. You know, the doctors can go, okay, wow, I actually believe Brooks is going to do what he says he's going to do.
Yeah. And Brooks, I want to just, I guess, affirm you in that, because I think even when we traded emails, when initially coordinating this, like my use case, right? Mid-30s, father of 2 boys, like my use case of Cheers, and for like the last plus year, when I'm in the East Coast, when I'm going to Las Vegas for a conference, so different time zone, I'm doing breakfasts at 6:30, 7 a.m. You're going to successive happy hours with other client partners, brokers, and dinner. This is not me just going out on the town. I'm a dad. I've got responsibilities. It's, hey, my schedule is packed when I'm traveling for work, and drinking is going to be a component of that, responsibly so. But if I'm going to be losing sleep in a different time zone, over caffeinated and indulging in some drinks with dinner, like this does make a difference. So I think for that like working professional that still needs to like tap into that extra gear and just having a better foundation for the following day. Like for me, that's the use case of Cheers. This isn't just like, hey, go willy-nilly, go wild, and this is going to fix your hangover and just endorse that behavior. Like if that's what you want to do, great. But I think the use case is far different and more to the tune of the one that I cited.
Yeah, and I've got 3 young kids, and I drink way less now than I would. Even if I'm going out to dinner, it's like maybe I'll have a drink or 2 drinks. Before, maybe I'd have like 3 drinks. But now I'm like, I don't want to not be my best in the morning when they wake up at 7 a.m. And then by midday, I'm kind of dragging. So the more that I can do, to make myself perform better, maybe, even if I am having 2 drinks, I still feel it the next day just because of the demands of, running a business, having multiple kids, constantly being on the go. So I agree with you. It's like, if you can frame it that way, that's how you can get doctors on board, because their patients are already doing it. So why not make their patients feel a little bit better? And I think it's great from a marketing framework too. If you think of a copy pitch or a landing page or even advertisement, it's the context of, or the concept of stop, hold, close, like having all these doctors that are rapidly showing up on your site, 159, maybe it's 200, 300 soon. That's the close part, right? Like you've sold them on the science. People may be skeptical, but now they see, hey, 300 doctors recommend this. Like I'm going to add it to my cart and actually make the purchase.
Yeah.
But
and by the end of this year, it'll be thousands of doctors. Well, James,
awesome.
Sean, thank you for affirming that use case and putting such eloquent words to it. We always like to say is that as you get older, less and less alcohol makes you feel worse and worse. And there's still so many people that believe out there, if you drink responsibly, you won't feel bad the next day. And that's just objectively not true. I mean, maybe they're, genetic mutants and we should try to clone them or something. But one thing that has helped us immensely is wearable devices, because people can see
huge.
that two glasses of wine, well within responsible drinking, 2 glasses of wine before bed, and you are going to sleep way worse, and your sleep score is going to be way worse, and your readiness score the next day is going to be way worse. And that's actually the basis for a clinical study we're about to embark on, which is take a few hundred people. Ideally, it would be a crossover design, because you wouldn't believe how much genetics affects how alcohol affects people. Probably related to that same GABA receptor that some people really like alcohol. Some people don't see it. Some people really benefit from Cheers. Some other people don't see as much benefit. There's a huge genetic component to this. But anyways, you can take, the idea is that you can take Cheers and you will see differences in your sleep markers using wearable, clinically validated wearable devices. And that's what we hope to prove with this study.
That's awesome. As you think about kind of pitching and awareness and credibility. You guys were on Shark Tank. I don't believe that you got picked up or funded by Shark Tank, but can you tell us about that experience? I mean, I'm sure just being on there and having a national audience had to be huge for the brand, even if you don't get Mark Cuban or Mr. Wonderful to write the check. How was that process for you guys, and how has it been post Shark Tank?
Being on Shark Tank was worth at least $1 million. Like if Shark Tank gave us the opportunity to go back on and they said, but you have to pay for it, I would, without seconds hesitation, write them $1 million check to go back on the show. Because it brings so much exposure to the business. I think we sold that year. I think we would have sold about $3 or $4 million, but because of Shark Tank, we sold $7 million that year in revenue. Where to start? So the process of Shark Tank is pretty long and arduous, and I would say there's 2 tracks. There is the open call track, and then there is the you got invited track. And I can't say too much. They make you sign all this paperwork that says you won't tell them how sort of the sausage is made, but I'll say what I think is fine to say. We got really lucky. I had always wanted to be on Shark Tank. I see it like as part of the American dream. It's like one of those like very cool, like entrepreneurial moments. I'd say it's like probably a top 5 experience in my life, like getting married, having a baby, winning a state championship, like swimming, like these are, going on Shark Tank. This is like one of the coolest moments of my life. They had actually called all the Ivy League schools, and I think just a whole lot of schools, and said, hey, we're looking for student entrepreneurs to be on Shark Tank. Do you have anyone interesting that's building a business on your campus right now? And so they just called a whole bunch of schools. Well, one day I just got an email from someone at the university saying, hey, we got like called by Shark Tank's one of their casting managers. Do you want to talk with them? Obviously the answer was heck yes. And then that kicked off that was probably a 15-month process. Wow. I think a 15-month process of fill out this paperwork, send in this video submission. We film every year. We film in June, and then we film again in September. They call them pods. You want to be in the June pod because the June pod is where they fill up like 75% of the episodes. And then the September pod is for like, backfilling, the rest of the season's episodes. One story that's really interesting is they actually kicked us out of the Shark Tank process twice. The first one was they said, hey, we're owned by Disney. Disney's, a Christian company. We think a hangover isn't like fitting for our audience or whatever. And I said, well, I just wrote a 90-page paper on a Christian theology of alcohol. And, in the preface, there is an explanation of how I founded Cheers and why I did it and why I think it's good for society. And I could explain like that on Shark Tank. And they're like, okay, we'll let you keep going through the casting process. That was like number 1. Number 2 was like, we were getting close. Like we were down, they start with about 60, I think back then it was 65,000 applicants. And then they'll only air 100 companies per season, right? Four companies per episode. Usually seasons are 25 episodes. So I think the math is like, it's 5 times harder to get on Shark Tank than it is to get into Princeton.
Wow.
And so anyways, we were kind of down to like the last few hundred people. This is like really where they're going to decide who they're going to buy flights and hotels for and fly out to LA for filming. And I get a call, and the casting manager, by the way, they get really attached to you. They represent Shark Tank. They do not represent you, but it is clear that the casting managers want their people. Like there's, dozens of casting managers. They really want their contestants to be on the show, right? Not the other casting managers' contestants. And so her name was Jen, and Jen calls me and she says, hey, Brooks, I got really bad news. As you know, Mark Cuban doesn't like dietary supplements. The producers has basically told us to go any company that we're trying to bring to them that's a dietary supplement. Mark said that he'll just ruin the episode, so don't even bring them out. Like, don't even film. And that was at like, I remember I was eating dinner at a Chinese restaurant with my wife, and I was like, well, don't do anything yet. I got to think, like, can I send you an email in the morning? She's like, yeah, I mean, but like, it's nothing. The decision's already made. It's not going to work. So I stayed up all night and I wrote a screenplay, like a mock screenplay. Mark Cuban's going to say this. I'm going to say this. Mark will say this. I'll say this. Mark would say this. I'd say this. And I wrote it like literally in a screenplay, font, everything.
That's awesome.
I send it to her the next morning, and she's like, sends back an email saying like, thanks. Like, I'll send it to the executive producers, but like, don't get your hopes up. Like, that's the email. A few weeks later, I get a call, and this is one of those, any news is good news, because we were like out of the process. And she says, hey, I guess the executive producers read what you sent to them, because I've been instructed to book your flights for LA. So what they do is filming takes like this is a September pod. Filming takes like 4 or 5 days, but the day before they start filming, they get all the people in that pod and put them in a big room. And they basically like read you your Miranda rights. Like, here's what's going to happen. You know, here's this additional contract that you're signing. Here's what's going to happen after Shark Tank, yada, yada, yada. And then what they would do is one by one in front of the entire audience, they would call you up. You would give your pitch, like your little 60-second pitch, to the executive producers. And then they would tell you a few things, and then they would send you back to your hotel and tell you what time to show back up for filming. And so I give my pitch, and then I can't think of his name. It's not Mark Burnett, but it's the name right above Mark Burnett when they roll the Shark Tank is his baby.
Yeah.
He says, Brooks, I've been casting for Shark Tank now for 9 seasons, and you're the first person to ever write me a screenplay of my own show. I think you and Mark Cuban are going to get in one hell of a fight. We're going to have the cameras rolling, and let's make some show business.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
And so, yeah, the thing isn't scripted. You get out there, you film for an hour. What you see is what you get. From that hour-long filming session, you have, unlike other shows where it's like very manufactured, really it's just you and the sharks, and you're on set and all the lights are there, so you can't see the audience. Like, you can't see the cameras or anything. I mean, it really feels like you're in the room with them. I mean, because you are, like, there's no one else there. But they'll film for an hour, and then they'll figure out how to cut that down into the most interesting 8 to 12 minutes. Sometimes they do that fairly. Sometimes they do that unfairly. I would say that they did a pretty good job of capturing what actually happened during our episode.
Oh, that's amazing. You love to hear the stories of kind of behind the scenes of how all that stuff works, especially when all you see is the end product, which is the 5 to 10 minute clip.
There's one thing. I was doing some digging on your profile, and there's just some things that like add up that I think kind of feed into this. So for those of you that, again, maybe that are watching, I think, Brooks, you do a great job. I love how you're like just manifesting things, like talking about, hey, it's gonna be thousands of doctors. You have got a coffee mug that says 100K a day. Just having kind of these like tangible examples and like real goals. You have a quote, and I think it goes back to even like your high school experience. You can't control the average of your life, but can control the trend line of your life. Can you talk to the audience about that and how you kind of incorporate that and everything that you're doing with Cheers now?
Absolutely. So I was a extremely good swimmer in high school, but I was kind of an average academic. It took me a little bit so really what happened is I became a Christian my sophomore year, and that really changed everything for me. So, for my life, there's kind of pre-Christianity, post-Christianity, and pre-Christianity, I had really not seen as much value to my life. And post-Christianity was like, oh my gosh, I only get one chance at this thing. I got to make the most of it. Like, life matters, let's do something. And so my freshman year of high school, I don't know what my GPA was, but I finished that year ranked 125th out of like 425 students. I then was always a really good swimmer, very I won the state championship in the 50 freestyle 3 years in a row, with my senior year breaking the state record. And so I pretty much had the opportunity to go to any school I wanted, so long as I had good enough academics to then get into that school. Despite being as good as I was, there was no chance in heck I would actually be good enough to go to the Olympics, because during my era of swimming, they only send 2 people per event. And if you're not Michael Phelps or Ryan Lochte, who was like world record holder and world record holder runner up, you weren't going to the Olympics. And so anyways, I knew I wanted to go to a school that swimming could get me into, a school that was better than I could get into on my own. And so I wanted to get into Princeton, and it came time to write your college essay. And what I said is, and I remember, you talk with all these recruiters and all this stuff, and they say, hey, look, your GPA and your SAT and your ACT, they're not there. You probably have a pretty low, even with us supporting us, you have a pretty low likelihood of getting into Princeton. And so I'm thinking through my college essay, like, what could I do that would impress these people? And I actually went and looked. I finished, by my senior year, I finished 11th out of those 425 people. And so I took my GPA from year after year and basically found if you deleted my freshman year GPA, I would have actually been valedictorian in high school. And so every year my GPA got better. And I said, the argument I made in my Princeton application was, do not look at my average GPA, look at the trend line of my GPA. And I think, yeah, my freshman and sophomore year at Princeton are going to be pretty hard, but I think I'm going to get the hang of it by my junior and senior year, and I'm going to keep with this trend line for the rest of my life. So please take a chance on me. And I guess the argument worked, because they ended up accepting me. But what I've really noticed is that there are people that will graduate an Ivy League university, or they'll get to some spot in life and they'll just kind of quit improving, right? Like they just don't have that drive to just keep becoming better and better and better. It's like they get the degree and they think that just that degree speaks for them. And so what I really like to look for in friends that I surround myself with, people we bring onto our team, other founders that I get closely connected with, is not what have they done and are they resting on their laurels, but where are they going? Like, what are their motivations? Where are they going to be in 10 years? And do I want to be with them on that journey? And so I really, really like to look at the trend line of someone's life rather than just what they've done in the past.
I think that's awesome advice, and really an inspirational story too. And I think it goes back to you writing the screenplay for Shark Tank, just, taking your shot. Like, you took the shot at Princeton, you made the argument, you took the shot with Shark Tank and made the argument. I think it's the same as you're pitching buyers at retail, everything else. An amazingly inspiring story, and really thankful that you came on to tell it. But I think that's about our time for today. But if you have any final thoughts, I'll let you.
Yeah, I'd add one thought. I think people are afraid to make their motivations known. And I'm not sure why that's the case. But I have found, a lot of people like to keep their goals and stuff private. I think when you make your goals public and you tell people what you're trying to achieve, what you'll find is that yes, there are ill-intentioned people who could use that against you. But the benefit of well-intentioned people understanding what you're trying to achieve in life and then helping connect those dots for you and wanting to support you in that journey far outweighs anything else. So I think it makes all the sense in the world to make your goals known, and ask people if they would help you on it, because I think most people want to help you on things. And so, and even when people come to me and say, hey, I'm trying to do this, could you help with this? Like, absolutely, I would help you with it. You know what I mean? And it's kind of that benevolent circle of life that I think you'll find in good industries.
That's great. I think that's a great final parting thought. And for the audience here, if you want to, please connect with Brooks on LinkedIn, connect with James and I. We always like to hear your feedback and your comments, and love to interact with you on all the social platforms. And we do this for free without advertising today. So if you find value in this, please share it with friends, colleagues, coworkers. It's really beneficial for us to gain traction. If you go to Spotify or Apple Music, leave us a review, follow and like our page. It helps to get traction in the algorithm. Thanks again for tuning in. And Brooks, we really appreciate your time. I think phenomenally inspiring advice and story. And I'm sure we'll be checking in with you again in the future when you achieve all these goals. And, it's Cheers becomes the next $1 billion brand.
That'd be cool.
That,
James, Sean, thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and look forward to doing it again or tuning into the show and seeing who you bring on next.
Perfect. Thanks, Brooks.
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks, Brooks.